Look, I came to Denver, Colorado after beginning my career in music. I started as a singer-songwriter and a musician and paid my way in college playing in bars and ended up progressing, getting with a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And in doing that, recorded an album. This is way back, as I was telling someone else, before electricity. The 1970s album. I every once in a while, some ancient person contacts me and says, "Do you have one of those? I want to put it in a slot for my history of the." So I'm more on the history side. Anyway, I stopped doing that in my mid-20s. And when I did that, I really felt like I wasn't trained to do anything else. But I knew that I needed to do something, and I needed to prove to other people, my family, people around me, and myself, that I could live in the real world. Because the world I had been living in had really been generally easy. It had been playing music and writing songs and being involved with the culture of that time, which was very loose and free. And I really looked at business as, oh my God, that is the pain and misery of the world. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had to work. I had to make a living. And by the time I got to Colorado, I had no money. I literally hitchhiked my way into the state of Colorado, and I knew one person, and he and his girlfriend at the time let me sleep on their breezeway in Denver in a kind of rough part of town. And I slept with their dog about 4 or 5 hours a day out there. And then at that point, I would just find part-time jobs to do. I got on food stamps. That's kind of where I feel like I started, on food stamps, kind of living on a park bench. So obviously there was a lot that happened between that and here, but it's important to know this. I did not start with a college degree. Because of music, I left to pursue that career before I completed my higher education. And I'm not wearing that as a badge of honor. I'm actually saying to you that that caused me a lot of concern and misery, and something that I felt time and time again I had to overcome. Not always because other people saw me as less serious or less educated, as necessary when the qualifications for a job said I needed to have that bachelor's degree, but also to myself, because I felt like I didn't finish something that I started. And business is about finishing something that you start and taking each thing on time after time and going from the beginning to the end and understanding the process to get there. But look, we'll talk about that at a different time. So I wanted more from my life, and I didn't really know how to do it. And I also met a beautiful girl that is my wife many years after that today. And we began our life together. And I had like 4 or 5 part-time jobs, cleaning a deli, working in the middle of the night, correcting tax returns, and doing a wide range of sort of sub-sandwiches and pizzas for a living. And I wanted to get married. I was now in my mid to kind of getting towards later 20s, and I asked my wife to marry me. And she essentially indicated that if that was going to happen, I needed to really prove my seriousness in life. And the request was pretty straightforward. You have to have one job. One job. Not 4 or 5 part-time jobs, but like a real full-time job. Anything is fine. Steve, do anything you want. There's no pressure on you, but you have to start doing something seriously. I got a job at a place called Evergreen Lawns. It was a chemical lawn care company where they sprayed lawns. And I got a job that I drove around the city all day long, doing lawn care estimates. And I would have to do about 30 of those a day, 6 days a week, in a car that I didn't have yet, in a car I couldn't afford yet, in a city that I didn't know yet, and how to get around. And to get the job, I had to pass a test proving that I knew what every coordinate was in the city so that they knew I could get places, because it was a very detailed day. Well, I studied, and in the phone book they had a grid map of all of the streets, and that's what I did. So inevitably, I learned the city, took the test after a couple times, passed it, and they hired me. And I was the recipient of $805 a month, no commissions, run my 30 estimates all day, and then in the evening until 9 or 9:30, sell those estimates. And to keep my job, I had to sell 6 customers a day, programs of an annual program of 5 treatments of lawn care. So it was a pretty long, hard day, about 13 to 14 hours a day. And on Saturday we worked also, although we didn't work in the evening, we worked from morning until night. And that was my life. And I got $805 for it, and my wife, in her job, she was in computer technology, learning software and doing installations, and she earned $1,000. So between us, we had $1,805 a month, and that was our life, and that's where we started. And I can tell you this, there was no time in my life to learn anything more about anything else than what I was doing. And so it became a bit frustrating, because there was really no way to be assured that I would ever gain any income. And at the same time, there was no way to learn what was a business like except the business that I was in. So I began to examine the business I was in and looking at the things that I felt I may be able to do better just in my gut. And I watched what was going on, and it wasn't like I took notes, but I was, with intention, focused on the idea that I needed to learn somebody else's job, because my job wasn't going to cut it by itself. And I was pretty good at my job. I was selling lawn care treatments at Christmas time, in snowstorms, 6 a day, no matter what. So I kind of grew up in a contact center as well as being out in the field running these estimates. All right, I finally saw an opportunity. I went to the owner of this thriving business that grew in the time I was there from 7,000 customers to, I think it ended up with 72,000, and I left it when it had 50-some thousand. So there was quite a bit of intense growth there, about 25 to 30 salespeople and estimators, and we were all just out there doing our best, kicking butt. Smoky room at night. We all lived this very intense life together. And people came and went. I didn't. I stayed. You know why? I wanted to stay married. I wanted to have that life. And I just couldn't figure out how to go get another job, so I just wanted to learn this. And I approached the owner and I said, I think I can do this job as sales manager better than your sales manager. I pushed and pushed, and I started to take a piece of paper, and I took this paper and I said, look at my way of doing it, my way of doing it. And every time I would go in with that, it was sort of a funny game. He would take it and he would throw the paper onto the floor and say, get out of my office. I persevered, didn't know what I was doing, had no education in it, and one day they needed a new sales manager. They terminated the one that was there, and the guy came to me, and he said, Steve, you're up. Now, I was very excited, and I learned my first business lesson very clearly. First of all, I knew nobody in that room wanted me to be that sales manager. Nobody saw me as strong. Nobody saw me as effective. And certainly nobody saw me as somebody with experience. Somehow the owner called me up, so I was the guy. So I needed, in my mind, to get those salespeople to like me. And that was my first lesson. That Saturday, we had a sales goal, and we all came in, and it was 2 days after I started. And I said to everybody, let's gather around the room and let's come together. And let's talk about how we as a group can make this the best place to work in the world. And we talked, and I was taking notes and talked more, and I was feeling good vibes because I felt like everybody liked me. And they were so excited to finally have a leader and a manager who was listening to them. And I felt so good, and I took my notes. And before I left that day, I wrote up all my notes. And of course, we didn't hit our sales goal because we took like 3 hours doing this, but we did our best. And I think everybody was motivated, so they sold pretty well for the time that they had. And I took my recommendations, and I filled it all out, stayed late, put it under the owner's door. Very pumped up. I love this management. I still hadn't gotten a raise for the management, but I did love the energy that went with it and the affection that people seemed to have for me. How good could that be, right? Monday I came in, and I walked right into the owner's office. He has a glass window, and he saw me, and I walked right in, and he waved me in, and I said, we had a really good Saturday. He said, really? So you did, huh? He said, so I see you gave me this thing. I'll look it over. I just wanted to say to you that I was a little disappointed you didn't hit your sales goals on Saturday. I'm not used to that. But look, I know everybody wants to talk about this, so I'm going to give you your paychecks on Tuesday when they come out myself. So I'll come in and talk to your group and distribute the checks. And I was excited as heck. I went in and I told everybody that the owner is listening. And he's going to take our suggestions, and he's going to improve this world for us. Our lives are going to get better. And he'll come in on Tuesday when payroll is and distribute that, and we're excited. He didn't usually come in. He was very soft-spoken, very big guy, soft-spoken, and he came in on Tuesday. I was just so happy. And he stood there, and he put that big old foot up on this type of a table. I thought that table come crashing down, of course, and he had all of his checks in hand. And he said, well, Steve has told me that you all took Saturday to do some work about fixing my company, and I'm wanting to come back and talk to you about that. And I want you to know that I know you took a lot of time and effort here, but I also want you to know that you didn't hit your sales goals. And it's interesting that not any of you, 28 of you, hit your goal on Saturday. So here's what I want to say to you. When I pay you, and he threw those checks on the table, and he said, when I pay you, we're even. I don't pay you to talk about how to fix my company. I pay you to sell for my company. And you have a choice you can make today. And it's to keep your mouth shut, get back on the phones, quit talking about how to make my company better, and make yourself better at what you do. And he turned around and he walked out, and that room was quiet as hell, and I was, oh my God, I have really screwed up. We lost 14 of those salespeople that day who quit. And I was sure that I was done in this job. I could never have felt so humiliated. He came in that night, at the end of the night, into what was my little cubbyhole office, and he said to me, Steve, looks like you lost about half your group. What are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. He said, well, you better hurry up and tomorrow sit down with HR and get a bunch of people hired before the end of this week. He said, but here's something I want to know. What did you learn from that experience? And I said, well, I learned I screwed up. He said, well, that's happened, but that's not what you should be learning. Here's what I want you to learn. I want you to learn that when you become a manager or you take a new position in a company, any position, your first job is to maintain the same modicum of performance that was there the day before you got there. It's to stabilize that business. It is not to disrupt it, screw it up, fix it. I don't hire people to fix anything. A business is a living, breathing organism that has its own pace. And no single person needs to be a hero to fix anything in any business that I know that's successful. And when you do something like you did that is so disruptive and you give people the idea that their value is greater than the need that I had in hiring them as a group, and you do that in group talk, you almost killed us. So I always want you to remember that the rest of your career. And I'm not going to fire you today, but I will if you don't fill up this room with salespeople before the end of this week. And he left. Well, first, I was just glad I had a job. And I still had one the next day. And I just went about hiring, and I can't tell you that I learned that lesson in that moment, but it was a lesson that today, decades and decades later, keeps coming back to me as the most important thing, because all of you that are watching this want more. And all of you that are watching this want to continue to grow. And that means you're going to have different positions at different times, and you're going to have ideas, and you're going to want to be great at what you do and how you look and how you feel and how people work with you. And you have to know that to get to that level, you first have to take what you have and work with it. Stay with what you have. Keep it steady, and then evolve it over time based upon the entirety of the ecosystem and not just your single area within a company. Well, I don't think I learned all that day, but I did get a start on the idea that I had a lot to learn. And instead of being scared and walking away, I didn't really have a choice. Scared emotions, those weren't things that I had the ability to do in that time, because I had to put a foot in front of the other and go to the next job the next day. And about 3 years later, I left that company. A lot of experience and a lot of success. And in spite of the fact that I was getting ready to get another promotion to become one of the leading people in that company, and I left, and I started my own business. And I started it, and it was a business to compete directly with the business I just left. And I told the owner I'd be doing that, and he said, well, that's up to you. You go do it. I'm not worried about you competing with me. We're doing just fine. So I went to work, and I started my own business. And 2 years later, I owed the IRS money. I couldn't make my payroll, and I was out of business, out of money, in debt, and nobody there to help me. That's the next stage of my career. And I made a decision in that moment of depression and sadness and fear. And I by then had a child. And I said, I'm never going to own a business again. All I want is a paycheck. I just want to feel some safety and stability. And I can tell you this even to this day. I don't believe that when you are running a business, safety is a part of it. I don't believe that you can do it without fear. And I don't believe there are a lot of nights that you sleep the whole night through. I believe that it's hard as hell to get successful, and it's even harder to get rich. Don't mean the fact that there aren't lottery wins out there and some of us just hit the right tone and the right chord at the right time. But that's not how you can play this game. You have to play this game accepting life on life's terms. But I didn't want that. I went out and I got a job, and it was in sales, and I learned how to sell. And I learned really well how to increase commissions so that I could pay my bills. But again, I wanted more. And I inevitably became a manager of those salespeople. Inevitably, I became I guess I would say a branch manager of the branch that I was running. And each step of the way, no one taught me anything. No one. But I learned from everyone because I knew I didn't know. So I watched everybody. And I came up with this idea that the people that seemed the most successful were not the people I liked the most. They were not the people that I wanted to work with. But they were more successful in that company. So I began to watch what they were doing and learn their behaviors. And I knew that I could be at least their level of success if I did what they did. So that's what I did. I mimicked other people, like them or not, I mimicked them to a degree within the context of my personality. And that was another lesson I learned. You must work within the context of your personality. Doesn't mean there aren't rules and process and standard approach to things, but be who you are in your way of talking, in your way of caring, in your way of hard times as well. So I learned that over the years. And now, look, we're way back in the 80s. And in 1987, I really wanted more and didn't know again how to break out. And I was scared because if I lost my income, we'd be 50% of what we needed in our household because we hadn't saved a damn penny. Because we weren't earning all that much. And I wanted to earn more. I can't tell you that I wanted to be a king. I can't tell you that I wanted to run companies. I can't tell you I wanted a business. I just needed more money. I just needed more money regularly. I saw a job offer with an international company, the largest company in the world in that space I had been in, chemical lawn care. And at the time, it was called ChemLawn. And in their North American office, they were owned by, in those days, a West German company. I began to apply for this job. I had none of the skills. They needed a degree. They needed experience in management that I didn't have. They needed a lot of things. And I always like to say I sort of lied my way into that job, and I got it. I got it with confidence. And I said I had done the things they wanted. And what they wanted was a corporate marketing job out of their regional office in Colorado that required me to control the entire marketing of this largest region in the country at the time. And suddenly I was in a situation on day 5, I realized it, that scared the hell out of me. I had no idea what to do. I was given a budget. I had never had a budget, but it was a serious budget, the kind of money that made me uncomfortable. And they showed me all their tactics that they had been doing year in and year out, and the results. And there were God knows, 50 of those tactics. And each tactic had an ROI of how many leads they got and how those leads were distributed to the different branches within that region. My God, this was way above my pay grade. And I didn't know what to do. And I decided, well, let me back up. I was sitting in an office with two other guys with MBAs that were white shirts, and they talked a lot amongst each other and didn't really include me. It didn't seem like I belonged with them, and they kind of sensed it. And they talked amongst each other all the time. And I just sat there trying to sort out how to do this job I had. And I had to come up with a marketing plan. And I had to do it for less money than they had done the year before. And I had to make more sales. Not just leads, as most marketing people are supposed to do, but sales as the outcome of those leads. So more with less and no knowledge behind it. So I listened to those boys talking all the time about how good they were and their vacation plans and all the stuff they knew as MBAs. And I decided the only way I'm going to get somewhere is to pull this off and get results. And I became determined to get results. And I just came up with a plan of how to manage each part of those tactics exactly the way they had been done before, so I didn't disrupt things. And then how to add, but eliminate some of them because I needed to spend less money, but then add new tactics that I invented a term called cost less tactics. How do I implement more tactics that don't cost me money? And I realized the win there was to begin to ask those people out there spraying those lawns, after they sprayed a lawn, to knock on each door around them, the neighbors, drop off some information, and to put their initial on it so if they made a sale from that, something, they would get something. And I took a risk because I didn't have money to give them anything. But I figured results would dictate that. It was a risk. It did keep me up at night, but I did it. And all of the branch managers in this region did not want me to do this. They did not want to disrupt their production, and so I couldn't mandate it. So I began this idea of, I went out with guys applying this lawn care treatment on their trucks, doing the work with them all over the region. And I began to get to know them, and I began to understand their job. And I began to figure out there were ways to do this while still letting them complete their day fully that would not be too disruptive. And I tested it out. And after I tested it out, I convinced each branch manager to please do this. And it's good for all of us. And they could not only make their goals this year, but possibly increase them and get buy-in from another department and connect them rather than keeping them separate, which, by the way, are lessons you want to learn. You don't want to silo, but you have to say how. How do I not silo? So I went ahead and I did this, and we blew it away. We were the most successful region in the world in this company. And we did it with less money, with more inventiveness, but without disruption. And it was a game changer for me. I learned how to take on a job and do it while not disrupting, not spending more money, and creatively getting results by forcing myself into the scheme of things and learning within that scheme how the job really worked on the basic level, so that when I came up with ideas, they were integrated into their day and not separate from their day. And that was the beginning of me believing in cost-less tactics, because I've never been in a company that wanted to spend more. Just haven't been in it. I've been in a lot of companies that want to solve their problems by doing less but getting more. And that sounds like an impossibility, but it worked out. And I grew in that business so much. I got fired one time in that business because the business itself was trying to sell itself. And when they tried to sell, they wanted to increase their EBITDA to have the maximum EBITDA by the end of that year. And they decided, they had 20-some thousand employees in America, that they would terminate 7,000 of them. And every single employee or manager of each level or supervisor had to evaluate on a very objective scale every employee in the company. Didn't know why they were doing it. And at the end of the day, corporate said, cut everybody below this line. Well, I wasn't below that line. I didn't get cut in that first draft, but I had to be a part of firing 5, 6, 7,000 people. And it did help. And we did this in August, and it helped the company get their EBITDA, but they certainly were in trouble the next year when they hadn't sold the company, and then they needed to continue to maintain or improve their performance. Without those people, how do you do that? Well, they went into a temporary solution with hiring seasonal help, which now I had to work with as a way to implement cost-less marketing tactics within our strategy and continue to be stable and grow. And we pulled it off. But it was always by bringing everyone into the problem and everyone into the solution. So I get fired one day because my boss didn't like me because I was getting a lot of headlines in that company because I had gotten to know the CEO of that company, the chairman of that company, and they looked at me as a model of what they wanted to do, and my boss didn't like that. So one day my boss took me to lunch with another fella, and they said, look, you've done great work. Thank you. You know we're terminating people, and you've done everything you can, and we're going to have to let you go because your salary is just high, sky high right now, and we just can't have that. And I said to them, you can't do that to me. You just can't do it. You need to go, Dave, or you need to go, but I'm not going. And they said, well, you don't really have a choice, Steve. You're gone, okay? So when you get back to your office, clear it out. We got into an argument. They stayed at lunch at that restaurant, and I went back to the office. And I had a plan for how to improve the company without letting go of people that was a full boat of cost-less tactics, handing out flyers, a lot of different things like that. Customer service group just making extra calls, saying certain things in different calls. And I went back, sat down, and pulled out this strategy I had, and I took another risk. In those days, we faxed, and I faxed this piece, this plan, to this guy named Dan, who was the CEO of the entire company. And I faxed it to him. My boss, Dave, was still not back. And I said, Dave and I have agreed that this is what we're going to do in the last half of the year. Dave told me that he had felt that he may have a need to terminate me just because of my high salary. And alternatively, what I'd like to say is, if we implement this plan, I can measure it on a weekly basis. And here's my promise. Any week that I don't hit my goal, any week that our region falls off, any week, let me go. No severance, no nothing. You just let me go. And I'll live week to week because I believe in this plan. Dave came in and he said to me, what are you still doing here? And I said, well, I'm just going kind of slow. And he walked out, went to his office, came back storming in, and he said, Steve, what the hell did you do? How dare you say I signed off on a plan to Dan? I didn't sign off on this plan, and he is excited about this plan now, and he can't wait to see how you perform. And I said, well, I did it because I want to keep my job, Dave. And by the way, it'll help you keep your job if they ever come to you. And if I'm successful, you're successful. So please do me a favor and get out of my office because Dan wants me to work here, at least for the next week. He hated me. To this day, he hated me. But what's interesting is later in life, he came to me and asked me to be a consultant for him. I did that for a while, actually. But so it isn't about warmth and friendship always. Sometimes it's about protecting yourself. But here is the point of this. The only way I protected myself, the only way was results, was building a plan that didn't cost anybody money, that I took the risk, and the risk was my career. And then driving it in a way that integrated it into the ecosystem, and everybody wanted to do it, or most of the people wanted to do it. And that's what I learned how to do. And listen, there are many iterations of what happened in my job as we went forward, but I learned a lot of lessons. Well, after that job, I realized that the only thing I knew were the things that I had experienced, and I needed to learn more. So I went to a library, and I began to go to bookstores, and I started to buy what I thought were important business books that I could read that would educate me, because I always felt that I didn't have enough information in this head of mine. Always. So I began to buy books, and I started to read them, and I hated reading. It wasn't action. It was just ideas, and they seemed so fluffy and so complicated and so detailed, and you had to be so smart to know. And my world was much more earthy than that. And I didn't really buy into all this stuff I was reading. Nonetheless, I had made a commitment to educate myself. So I began to, instead of reading the book from cover to cover, every day I'd open up the book and I'd take a chapter and I'd read a chapter a day in a book. And did this for like decades, every day. And I filled up this vessel. I filled it up with a heck of a lot of information. And here's what I want to say to you. Although there were things I read that were inspiring, and there were things I read that bored the hell out of me, things that didn't relate and things that did, ultimately, I learned how to be disciplined in educating myself. I learned how to stay with something I started. I learned how not to need immediate results with an action I was taking, and just take it for what it was. And there were no epiphanies. None. But over the years, what I've realized is I filled this up with so much information that from time to time, I'm tapping into information I don't even know where I get it. But it's from all of that. It's this self-drive education, recognition, learning that I went through. And I became a consultant to businesses finally. And I began to help businesses that needed to turn around and were in desperate shape. And there were some lessons I learned in that experience too. And that experience taught me something. It taught me that every business that's in trouble does one thing right away. It seems to me they cut marketing. And no kidding, they're going to be in trouble. Because if they thought they'd dig themselves out of trouble, they weren't going to do it with doing less marketing. I understand reducing a budget. I understand even reducing my marketing budget. But I don't understand not adding tactics anyway. Don't forget there are cost-less tactics that, frankly, can be way more effective than the cost-full tactics that nobody wants to spend money on. So people will cut their budgets, but not come up with alternative means of how to continue to market and sell and maintain their brand. They will maintain their ability to produce usually, but not the stuff that feeds the business to maintain its stability and possible growth. So I would walk into businesses time after time and teach them how to add cost less tactics to what they were doing. Not to force them to spend more, but how to do more with less. And that sort of became, one of the skill sets and experiences that I had. And one day I was doing a business, and it was just two guys and a developer, a software developer, that was developing a call center technology. They called them dialers in those days, and this was now 1998. And they asked me to build marketing. They said they had a great product, and to build marketing and sales around it for them and build the structure so that they could take it from there. And I did that, and during a short time, within about a year, I realized a couple things. The product did not work well, and that software developer was just in pain all the time. And at the same time, I learned that they had 5 customers in that time, that if this business shut down, they would kill those customers, because those customers were using this dialer, those call centers using this dialer, and they were using it as their basis, their foundation. It was mission critical. They had hundreds or thousands of agents that were logging in every day to this to make their phone calls, manage their data, and take their orders. And our software wasn't working great. So inevitably, what my job became, in as much as I was building their structure to sell, was how to add some hands to help it work. So I would show up with a developer to do implementations, which meant I had to learn every piece of that software. I mean, the user side of that software. I also had to learn how to use it, so I trained it. And every time I did this, I felt closer to the problem. I knew more about it, and I kept my view on the long view, although I did the immediate in front of me. And I began to learn how technology worked and how the commitment to a customer who buys technology is the single most important thing you can do. And that most companies sell software. They have software salespeople sell software, and they want to make sure the software works, but they have no clue as to how that software integrates into that business. And they never step over into the customer side of things and say, what is the need of the customer in using this software? And how can I, and even if they know that, they don't say, how can I help the customer in how they use the software? A customer is giving you a gift of trust when it's mission critical. And you have to return that trust with passion and relentless effort. You have to have integrity, and you have to meet your promises and work every day to do that. They never buy perfection from you, but they do buy your intensity and your effort. And you have to give it, and you have to give it at no matter what the cost is. And that's something I learned. And then these two owners decided to close the business and leave because they didn't want to run it anymore. They only had these 5 customers, and it was just too hard for them. And that left me and the developer. And we refused to leave. Even though I was just a consultant, we refused to leave because we were taking care of those 5 customers, making sure that we did all the things to meet the promise of the gift they gave us in choosing us. And so we refused to leave. And so they said, well, you can have this business and software, we don't care, but you have to take on all of the debt that we have. And it was $1.2 million of debt, and we had no money coming in. And we did it against the will of our families, against our own desire, because we didn't want to live in a situation where we were hostage to a commitment that was made to those customers. and do it while we were poor, living in a sleeping bag per se. We had this little warehouse office that had broken down. It had broken down drywall, and we would pick up drywall when we'd see it on the in a bin, and we'd bring it in. And on the weekends, when we had a minute or two, we'd pull down the bad drywall and put up a good piece of drywall. And that's how we started building a business that inevitably became one of the global leaders, Touchstar Software, in what it did. With 6 global offices, about 400 to 500 employees. We had offices in the Philippines. We had offices in Mexico. We had offices in New York. We had offices in England, India, and elsewhere, local offices. 6 global offices and offices from New York to Iowa to Denver to Phoenix in the States. And we did that with 2 guys that never wanted this business. I never wanted to own another business, but we couldn't walk away from our commitment to customers. And we just began to sell one at a time to feed ourselves and pay our mortgage when we could. We didn't lose our homes, but we learned how to break every rule. We learned how to do a lot more with a lot less and bring in all of this experience I had of cost less tactics. And we've just learned how to tell the truth to customers and tell them that our truth was a good bet versus other software that may or may not work. We would tell people our software isn't perfect. We would tell them we're certainly not, but we would tell them we always got your back. And we built our business that way. And we began to grow one at a time, and it took years to do it, 10 years, to get to where we needed to get to through the first decade of this century. But the lessons we learned, they just were incredible. The pain, the misery was beyond anything we could have imagined. I had never experienced so much fear. We had to learn how to run a business, how to build process into the business so it was repeatable and sustainable. But we had to afford to do it at the same time, and we had to build a brand in a business, in an industry that was pretty mature already. It didn't want us in it. So and we never had an idea. We're going to be a global leader someday. We built up to 15 employees finally at one point, and then everything fell apart one day because we lost an enterprise customer. And by the way, I've learned enterprise customers, that's not the day that you get excited when you sell them. What you should be excited about is every customer you get, but the small ones are the better ones because they don't run away from you. Because 20 other companies aren't coming at those small ones saying, try me, leave them, try me. And I'm not against enterprise customers, but if you're going to have enterprise customers, you best have a bunch of them. Whatever size customer you have a bunch of them. Okay? So, as we built this company, we learned all the basic fundamentals of SOPs. But there's a whole nother layer, and this is what I'm going to talk about in this podcast season with you. And the other layer are all of the SOPs of how to break the rules, how to live on the edge, and how to recognize that sometimes you must take on the risk because the alternative is you'll let down your customer. And now you have 2 customers. You have your customer that bought it, and you have your employees that buy you. And you have to meet your promise to both of them. And so with that, after I sold our company, I inevitably began to just become a CEO for other companies and decided I wasn't going to own a company anymore. 40 years before I said the same thing, but I'm certainly not ready to retire. So I'm going to bring what I know to companies in software, in contact center software, especially because I just happen to know it. And then I'm going to help them stabilize their business and form them in a way that can help them meet their goals. And I've done that a number of times with some local and global reach companies, is what I do today. And the formulas are the same, and they always work. And I had one test of that formula, I will tell you. After I sold TouchStar, I bought into a tiny little cyber technology company. And I just had to see, do my methods work or do they not? And I found they worked exactly the same. The words change, the methods stay the same. But there are some basic beliefs I've talked to you about in other podcast seasons. And one that is critical to everything was to recognize that before I can lay out a formula that works, I have to know what I believe in. And I once was interviewed in our office. I was in Pakistan, in Karachi, and interviewed on their version of the Today Show, per se. And they began to interview me because I was a global CEO of a tech company with an office and bringing jobs into Pakistan. And that was, of course, important to them. And I got interviewed, and they began to ask me a whole bunch of questions about things I believed in that were not business. And I was only focused on business. I had no social ideals. I had no ideals. I just had an idea to run a business the right way. But they asked me questions for a few minutes, and I miserably got through it. And although I may have faked my way into an okay interview, I knew I failed because I knew I didn't know what I believed in all these areas of social economics and other things, politics, terrorism, you name it. They asked me, and I didn't know how I believed about any of it. I was just too focused on what I was doing. So when I got on that airplane, I had this 14-hour flight, I think, and I ended up sitting down with a pad, a legal pad, and I wrote down physically, not on my computer, but I forced myself to really touch it, everything I believed in about everything, anything. What do I believe in? Anything, not business, not just business, but everything, socially, politically, personally, everything. And I wrote everything, and I was shocked. I believed in a lot of things. I believed in I could have kept going, to tell you the truth. There were so many things I believed in, and so many things connected me to the next thing I believed in. And I got, for the next year, very intimate with learning what I believed in. Not deciding what I should believe, but just learning what I did believe that I wasn't aware of, in a sense. And it became the foundation for me to do what I would tell you today I am, to be in my prime. So as much as I may be older than most, I'm not ready to retire because I now, finally, after years, am in my prime. I'm now at a point that I know what I believe in. So there is not a question I can be asked that I don't have my answer to. I may not have the right answer or other people's answers. There isn't a business decision I can make that I won't make. I don't mean they don't trouble me. I don't mean they don't create fear in me. But I know how to make a decision because I know what I believe. And look, here's another thing. I believe this, that we're managers, we're paid to be managers, and managers make decisions every day. So I believe that if I make the wrong decision today, tomorrow I'll just make a different decision. And that there's more value in learning in a company how to say yes to people, places, and things than the comfort that people seem to get in why they can't do something, or the comfort in saying no. So with that, look, I'm going to end this. I hope today you know Steve Biederman, because I think that's a critical piece in the next series that we're going to do. And let me tell you a little bit about this series. We're calling it The Delusions, the myths of business. The first one is going to be corporate kin, the family business fantasy. And this talks about the idea that we all say we're a family in a business. And is that a myth or not? Well, stay tuned. I hope you enjoy this season, and I hope that you've gained some good value from what I'm talking about. So take care.